Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Photographer Profile. My name is Nathan Rupert, and I started this podcast to give photographers a worldwide platform to share their work and stories. My guest today is Charles. Hey, Charles, how are you doing?
Hey, Nathan, glad to be here.
Just please give the viewers an introduction about yourself and your photography for those people watching.
Sure, I am located in the Space Coast of Florida. Literally, you can look out the window within sight and see Kennedy Space Center from my house. It's about 12 miles away over a couple of rivers. What I do is I go out to the Space Center or the surrounds of it, take launch photography, and I use those in two publications. I sell stock and I also sell prints.
Wow, you're a product of your environment there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not the only photography I do, but it's the photography that I do the most of right now.
Do you have any hobbies you enjoy outside of photography?
Oh yeah, definitely boating, kayaking, hiking around. Florida is a pretty natural state, believe it or not. We have a lot of development here, but at the same time, we have a lot of wilderness too. For example, Kennedy Space Center is in the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. It's hundreds of square miles of totally undeveloped space. In fact, the longest undeveloped stretch of beach on the east coast of Florida is in Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. There's a lot to do here.
Do you see gators and other crazy creatures all around the area?
Oh yeah, every day. Where I live, I call it a pond. It's about an acre. And we'll have a little baby alligator try to take up residence there every now and again. And they're cute, but I have seen some really big ones when I'm out in the middle of that National Wildlife Refuge in the middle of the night to shoot a launch. That's when you have to be especially careful because there's lots of things out there that are trying to eat you. Most notably, mosquitoes. Those are the most dangerous.
Oh, and the hardest to photograph, too.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen a mosquito in flight in a good picture.
Are you a full-time professional photographer? Like photography is your main source of income, or is this a hobby for you? What's your status?
I
There.
am I am a retired professional photographer.
Huh.
I used to do glamour and fashion during the 80s when print was, really still around. You could sell, in local and regional advertisements or, even stores to display inside. It was a good living, a lot of work. I had a studio, etc. That all sort of ended with the internet, the rise of the internet. It's made photography more available and it's made it, frankly, harder to sell to printed publications because there's just fewer of them. What I do now is I'm an IT professional during the day, and I have a side business that we do space and Florida news on it. I also provide articles and and pictures other to another publication.
That sounds like a great retirement gig.
Yeah, it does. And I hate to admit it, but I'm not that far from that. I plan to stay very active. Right now, there's a launch on the average about every 3.5, 4 days here. That's only supposed to go up. I try to grab pictures of each one for documentary and, for the articles for those two publications. But, also just to have a collection of this is what happened in 2024. I think in 2024, it's been over 100 launches so far, and I think I've missed four.
Wow, that's some dedication. A round of applause for you. That is some dedication. Well, let's not keep people waiting. Let's look at your picture showcase here. Let me go
Okay.
ahead and present. Okay. Do you see that?
Oh, yeah. That is the Falcon Heavy, SpaceX's big rocket that's in operation right now. They have another one, Starship, that's under development. And this is launching the NASA NOAA GOES U weather satellite. A
Oh,
big old satellite that they put up there. I forget the exact date, but it was a few months ago. It was a beautiful launch because the lighting was really nice that day. Florida is Florida. We get a lot of rain here. We get a lot of clouds here. People think of it as the sunshine state, and it is. But the thing about it is that we also have a lot of inclement weather too. I was really happy that this harsh sunlight, I had a little bit of cloud diffusion to soften it up. And I took this picture using a Nikon D750,
Okay.
and it was placed remotely. And it
Oh,
was
remotely.
used,
Wow.
yeah, right where this picture was made from, the sound alone from the rocket would probably be deadly.
Oh my God, really?
Oh yeah,
Wow.
oh yeah. Um, this particular rocket probably goes up to about 160 decibels. I mean, we're only, I think they're less than a quarter mile from the actual rocket itself. And, they're noisy. That's 27 rocket engines blasting 1.7 times 3 million pounds of thrust. So, yeah, it's a lot of noise. And that's also in something called the BDA, or blast distribution area. The blast distribution area is interesting because if there was an accident and the rocket were to explode, it's very unlikely, but it has happened. The shrapnel might get you as a person if the
Oh
sound
my
didn't.
goodness.
So, yeah, we use remote cameras with myops for the most part. Funky little environmental enclosures. A bunch of Rube Goldberg devices that myself and the fellow photographers put out there because it rains and there's
Yeah.
wind, and but at the same time we want to keep our lenses clean too.
How far ahead do you put the camera and get the setup ready before the launch, usually?
Uh, Generally the day before, which means we're going to go through a dew cycle. But what we'll do is we will put lens dew heaters, which are pretty common in astrophotography, onto the lens barrel. A lot of guys use the hand warmers that skiers use, and they'll just use
Okay.
rubber bands and put those on the barrel. It changes the equation of getting dew on the front of your lens.
How do you know the composition is right? You said you have your camera, an additional camera to make sure that the
Mhm.
composition looks good.
What we do is we'll go out there the day before the launch. We put tripods down. We'll use tent stakes or something like that to
Huh.
actually affix the tripod to the ground, because not the wind from the rocket, but the noise itself. If a thunderstorm comes through and the wind is up, you don't want your camera blowing over. That's going
Right.
to be a ruined shot for sure. And I'll sit there, I'll aim it, I'll compose it, set the camera up to its settings, and engage the myops. We use sound mode. When it detects really loud sound, and I just mentioned that, it starts firing. I have this camera set to fire every quarter second because it's an older
Wow.
Nikon, and I think 7 frames is the buffer. And I really want to get as much as I can of that rocket lifting off until it exits the frames.
What kind of shutter speed aperture do you use for
The
these
aperture,
ISO?
uh, well, let's start with the ISO. It's 100. I try to
Okay.
shoot really fast, 1000 or
Okay.
higher. And that particular one is f14. And you see the flame plume coming out from the bottom of the rocket. It is extremely bright. I mean, it's like looking at the sun
Yeah.
bright, I should say. And what I try to do is expose for that, not completely blow out my highlights. Then I'll just bring the rest of the picture up in Lightroom to have good balance with it.
I like how you included the logo there to give that context for the shot. You're not just focusing on just the rocket.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
I use the rule of thirds to my advantage here, even though the rocket is slightly to the left of the third line. It has the warehouse that the rocket came out of. It has the logo that gives you an idea of whose rocket it is. Because let's face it, 20 years from now, when you look at this picture, you're not going to necessarily know that that's a Falcon Heavy. It really just kind of ties it into a place, and gives it a little bit of, this is where we are. It's just a favorite composition of mine.
Did you intentionally keep the other cameras in the shot instead of photoshopping them out? Was that personal choice or?
Yeah, I left them in, and I could have easily used any of the AIs to remove them, and put green grass or whatever there. But in a way, I feel like that's kind of cheating. And this is photojournalism, but we do have a tad of artistic license. But on the other hand, if I start adding and removing elements, then we're moving into the realm of art and not photojournalism. I try to be as honest as I can in my pictures. Some of them are highly edited, but at what happened actually happened.
Let's take a look at the next one here. We have a lot to get through, so
Okay.
I want to make sure we have time.
Yeah, sure.
All right, 1 second. A little more close up than the previous picture was.
Okay, that is the same rocket that you saw taking off in the last picture. That is one of the side boosters. They both returned for a landing at actually about 8 miles downrange, and this is a 22-story device.
22
It comes,
stories. Wow.
yeah, it's really tall, and it comes out of the sky almost. I don't want to use the word bomb, but it's like in free fall, and then suddenly it fires up and just comes to a halt and settles down to a gentle landing. I use a 180 to 600 Z lens for this particular
Okay.
shot, even though it's a light lens compared to the old telephotos, even primes. It's still pretty heavy. So, trying to find it in the viewfinder, get a, good tight zoom so you're not cropping to the point where you're lost in the sauce, in terms of noise, etc. It can be pretty tough. And the lighting conditions, as you can see, they're heavily backlighted here. I'm really proud of that picture because if you look at the bottom of the rocket flame, that green that green part of the flame is actually a separate chemical than the yellow part. The bottom is called TTEB, and that actually ignites three of those rocket engines that burn kerosene, which you can see in the yellow and oranges part. So I really like this picture. Every once in a while, I'll get one that I really like, and others, they're serviceable, but we always have our favorite children.
So you have your remote shooting the rocket taking off, but you're physically at the landing zone to take this picture
I was
then?
about 3 miles away, I think. I've never really calculated how far it was. The way that we do a rocket shoot is we'll go and set the remotes, and
Mhm.
that's all automatic. We won't see those until hours after the launch when we go to pick them up. But what we will do is we'll go to NASA's press site, and we'll shoot from 3.5 miles, or on the in the case of the landing zone, it is a little bit further south. So, and it's on a Space Force base. And the Space Force press office, they're really good about taking us out in the middle of this secured military base, and we get to go stand out, in some little corner of the Space Force base and shoot the landings. Also, where we shoot the landings from is another launch pad that you'll be probably showing pictures of in a minute. So,
What's the length of time from the takeoff until you would see a piece like this coming
about eight
down?
minutes. It
Oh,
takes
8 minutes.
8 minutes, 8.5 minutes from takeoff to actual touchdown. And this is maybe 8.25 minutes where it's firing up. And, the rocket's at an angle that at this point, but it's going to straighten up, and it's got some landing legs that are going to come down, and then it's going to settle down below a tree line. Photographing rocket launches is almost like wildlife photography, and that there's hours and hours of boredom followed by just a few moments of excitement.
Wow. Yeah, this is a whole new realm for me. I don't know if I've ever,
Mhm.
known someone or interviewed someone that did something like this. So this is a whole new realm for me. A lot of questions
Oh,
here.
yeah,
This
that's the
is
ball.
great.
I got time.
Before we look at your next photo, I have some
Okay.
fun questions for you. I'd like to ask all my guests. What is the best piece of photography advice that you've learned from a mentor or that you've learned throughout your career that you can pass on to others?
The best camera there is in the world is the camera you have with you. People, they get really gear happy, and gear is important. Obviously, I have long telephoto lenses. It is important to a degree. People just fall a little bit too much in love with gear. Gear is important, but at the same time, skills are the most important thing.
Let's take a look at your next one. I'll get it ready here.
That is a boat that has got grounded in the Banana River. We have two rivers in this town, one the Indian River and the other the Banana River. And the Banana River is the one that pretty much runs up to the Space Center. So speaking about one of those launches where we're really far away, this is one of those, and it's at night. So really the only good photograph you're going to get is a streak. What else can you include as a foreground element to make it interesting? Well, I used the reflections for this, and I used one of the ghost boats. They're very common here. When a hurricane comes through, you'll see 4, 5, or 6 of these afterwards sitting in the river. What it is there's a kind of a subculture in Florida of retirees that live on boats that really just don't have any money whatsoever. When the boat is unlivable, they just leave, and they leave it floating in the water. The double C here had drifted up almost onto the bank, and we walked out. And this required a little bit of bravery, I got to tell you. We walked out in water in Florida in the middle of the night up to our hips. Myself and one of the Florida Today photographers, he was right to my left in this picture. And I just wanted to get an interesting picture. So I got that. I arced, let the trajectory of the rocket arc over the boat, and I had a little bitty light panel back on shore. I think I had it at like 20% just to give, a little bit of light to that boat. Off in the distance, you can see Port Canaveral, and you can also see the moon is streaking along with some stars there.
Did you use a tripod for this? You said you're in the water.
Oh yeah. I use a tripod for that. And, this is probably about a 3 or 4 minute exposure.
3 or 4 minutes. Oh wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
long.
the rocket itself is like a bright dot, and as it rises and starts to curve over with the Earth to go to orbit, that's where you get the curve in that trajectory shot.
I assume ISO
Oh,
100 and
as low as your camera can go, and you'll want to probably use f16 or so, ISO
F16.
100 at a minimum, 3 or 4 minute exposure, and be prepared to do a little bit of work in Lightroom to to balance everything out. A lot of us learn very quickly to shoot dark and come up.
Yeah, and I think I bet you I could guess that guy named this boat too, not a girl.
There are some strange boat names here. Some really bad puns and some really funny ones too.
You could probably do a whole like coffee table book of just crazy boat names that you've seen.
Yeah, not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. I should maybe start collecting those pictures. I am kind of working on, a collection of the ghost boats themselves. I was at a sailboat the other day, and I didn't send you a copy of this picture, but it had the hurricane had ran it into the ground, and I'm looking at this thing going, this thing had to cost $250,000 new. And somebody had to be so proud when they sailed that away from the dock the first time. And now look at it.
Oh man,
It's just a shame. I mean, I wish I had the time and the money to restore something like that. But they say that boats can be a hole in the water that you throw money into. Well, I own a boat. It's not that expensive. But then again, I'm not trying to restore one from sunken, back to sailing.
and all your boats have survived the hurricanes.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, mine are the kind that you put on a trailer and then put it up when you're done. So.
Okay, there you go. All right, another question about you before we look at more pictures. What do you see as the future of photography? 20 to 30 years. Will photography still exist? What are your thoughts on the future of photography?
I think photography as a visual medium will always exist. I also think that digital capturing will get better and better. I see photography as getting more and more realistic, better dynamic range, lower noise. I expect cameras to get better and better and better. I expect the software will get better and better and better. And it's going to make photography even more accessible than it is. And it's going to miniaturize. It may end up where only professionals are shooting what we call a mirrorless camera today, mirrorless SLR. And the vast majority will be using a highly capable, cell phone camera or something like that. The nice thing is they always have that with them. Also, I think video is going to become more important in mirrorless cameras. We're seeing that, with the so-called hybrid cameras. Canon has out, the cine cameras. Nikon has gone and bought Red. Sony is Sony. They're always, not always, have been right at the top since they got in the camera game. They're not going to drop out. I'm hoping that this competition makes gear cheaper and better.
I like that very optimistic outlook there. That's great. All right, let me get your next photo here. Super close up on this one.
This is what we call the engine shot. There are people that do far better than I do with these, because they have more experience at it than I do. This is a very strange photograph. It is shot at ISO 100. It is 4,000th of a second, and it is at f14, and it's a zoom on the very bottom of the rocket. And really all we want to do is get the streaks of the propellant that's on fire coming out and just put a stop motion to that. This is a Falcon 9, so what you're seeing is 9 engines worth of this. The fog at the bottom of the picture is actually smoke and steam from where it's lifting off of the pad, because they spray the bottom of the launch pads with water. I mean, a lot of water, and that's for sound suppression and also to protect the rocket as it rises up. We all shoot this shot, and this is a lesser interesting one to me than, say, one of United Launch Alliance's Vulcan rockets, where the flame is blue and it has 4 solid rockets on the side, blowing out perfectly white flames with little flecks in it. I have used this shot over and over and over again in illustrations and on websites, because it's a nice background. It kind of tells a story, especially if you're on a spaceflight website. It's pretty interesting to look at because not many people see a view like this.
I like how you got it almost perfectly vertical. I don't know if you had to Photoshop it perfectly vertical.
No,
like that, but you did a good job. Perfectly up and down there.
We use levels and things like that to make sure, because we only have one chance to set it up. And the last thing that you want to do is 15 minutes before launch time go, I wish I'd done blank. And that has happened to me, and it happens to everybody. Anyway, long story short, we're really careful with our setup. On this particular case, I got lucky. It is cropped in just a little bit, but maybe only 30%.
No, that's really... Before we look at the next photo, another question for you.
Okay.
You've taken thousands of photos in your life, all these years. What do you want to happen to all these photos you've taken when you die, when you're no longer here? Do you care? Do you have anything you want to happen to all these photos that you've taken over your career?
That's an interesting question. In some cases on the works for hire that I've done, obviously that doesn't matter, but my personal portfolio, I would hope that someone in my family at least would want to keep the files and the photo books that I have laying around, not published photo books, but books of my own prints. I hope that the people that have actually been kind enough to buy my prints will give those to their children, and hopefully they'll value them. I do want to one day, before I hang up the camera for good, have that, moment in history shot that everybody will refer to. That requires a lot of serendipity and, being in the right place, having the right camera, having the right settings, and taking, a good enough picture to be able to go and clean it up a little bit in Lightroom or Photoshop and make it memorable. So, and unfortunately for us, that memorable moment would be if a rocket exploded. I have seen it happen.
Oh my God.
It was before I started shooting launches. It's not pretty because a lot of people put a lot of work into that thing. And, there's a saying here that everything has to go right out of hundreds of thousands of things on this mechanical device that's going to be in space in 9 minutes. But only one thing has to go wrong for everybody to have a bad day. God help us if it's a crewed launch. Fortunately, we have safety systems now. Unfortunately, people here have lost their life on ascent. I saw it, and it haunts me to this day, even though it was back in 1986. So I've been kind of racking my brain is how can I have an original shot that people will want to look at twice? Compared with some of the best photographers in the business, there are some really, really high skilled guys here. John Krause, he put together the whole content machine for the Polaris 4 mission. He's a photographer. He's a young guy in his 20s. His originality and craft just astound me at how good he is. He's not the only one. The competition is fierce, and coming up with that original picture is hard. But we do
You can
it
do
once.
it. I believe in you. I believe in you. You can
I
do it.
think I'll get something. I'll get something good, and like that engine shot we just saw. I think I'm gonna shoot one of those. I'm gonna shoot one of the liftoff pictures. I have thought about picking up another D750 body, or two for that particular launch, and just put as many as I can out there.
Okay, well, let's take a look at some more fun pictures. Super cool shot here.
What happens is when a rocket comes close to the speed of sound, the pressure of the sound waves coming off, the shock waves, if you will, they'll impact the moisture in the air. If there's a big enough pressure differential and the light is right, you'll see the rocket, not a minute even, it's just a second. That's a vapor cone. And the reason that the sky is black in that picture is I shot it at a very high speed, and I wanted it to be high contrast. When I threw it into actually Photoshop in this case, say tone it automatically and color it automatically, it removed any of the blue in the sky and gave me that little bit of touching up on the curves. And I came up with this picture, but it's just an instant that this happened.
Reminds me of shooting the air shows here. We have the Miramar Air Show here in
Right.
San Diego.
Mhm.
Trying to get that vapor in the jets.
Yeah, it's the same exact thing.
All right, let's take a look at another one. This is right here. Out of this world.
That
This
was the
one.
miss. This is almost a holy grail shot, and a lot of guys are really good at the software that you can use to find the exact place that you need to be to match the trajectory of a rocket that's moving at this point, a couple thousand miles an hour or more over the moon or the sun. And I did those calculations, went to the exact spot, and missed it by just this much. And
What did you want it? Where did you want it exactly?
I wanted it to go
Here.
right through the center of the moon.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, we call those transits. The best ones are when they're against the sun, but I kind of stay away from shooting that because I just have a natural inclination to never point a telephoto lens on a mirrorless camera at the sun, filter or
That's
not.
a good idea. That's a good idea, probably.
Yeah, I've actually seen a sensor that had a hole in it where somebody did that, and they didn't do it on purpose. They had their telly set up at the sky and went away for a few minutes. The sun crossed through the focal arrow of the camera, and it just did a job on that sensor. It was a really sad day for that fellow.
I mean, I don't think the average person would see this shot as a miss, right? They'd be like, "Oh, that's super cool! You got it right next to the moon. That's awesome!" Right? It's funny how we
Mhm.
see it as a miss as a photographer, but the average person would not see this
Oh yeah,
as a miss.
I could further dissect this picture and say that I think it's a little soft, and I wish I'd used a higher shutter speed. Blah 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 blah. But then again, aren't as photographers we're always our own worst critic, you know, and that's okay, I look at these pictures and I want to get better. The next time that I try one of these, which will probably be in the next, I don't know, 3-4 weeks. Maybe I'll get a little bit luckier with the actual transit through the moon, and I'll have my technicals down. Because the moon's moving too, and anybody who's ever, the average photographer who's gone out with a telly and tried to shoot the moon finds out real quickly that you better shoot fast to get the moon to be as sharp as you can get it.
All right. Well, before we look at your next picture, a question: what aspect of your photography do you feel like you need the most improvement in, or you want to learn?
Well, the thing that I'd like to improve is composition, because I'm always trying to be better at composition. One of the worst feelings that I get is when I look at, the unprocessed version of a photograph and go, if I'd only shot this just a little wider,
Yeah.
something like that. Technically, I think that my skills are, adequate to do the tasks that I want to do, but I always want to get better at those, and I always want to get better at composition.
That's a good answer. I can't say anything against that. We're always trying to improve, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let me get the next photo ready. You are sharing screen. There we go.
Falcon
Another
9.
launch.
Yep, Falcon 9 NG20. That's a remote picture. I am very happy with the entire series of pictures that came out of this, because I'm shooting against a vivid blue sky. And this was in the winter. They spray a lot of water on the launch pad to protect the rocket itself and to diminish the sound as much as they can. It always puts up a beautiful cloud. I got a little bit of that, but I also got the details of the rocket coming off of the pad, and I didn't blow out the plume too much. I didn't have to do very much work to this at all. It was almost straight out of the camera. That
People probably think that plume came from the rocket, but it's not.
No, it's water.
Yeah.
So
The
yeah, I
average
mean,
person would think that's from the
mhm.
rocket. The average person looking at this.
Yeah, the average person would think that. That's something that I do tell the tourists and the visitors that I come across, is that is water. That's to really protect you a little bit and protect that multi-million-dollar device that's flying off to space too. SpaceX is very careful in that they want to protect their equipment, so they all use water sound suppression, and have for since I was a little kid back in the '60s. But it gives some artistic possibilities.
I like that one. Let me share the next one. This is where you're talking about showing the
Right.
atmosphere around the launch.
Hmm. Now, this is telephoto compressed and is cropped in just a little bit. So let's be honest here. They are 4 miles away from that particular liftoff. It's a 22-story device, but this is Playa Linda Beach. It's in the wildlife refuge. It's very popular with folks that come to Disney World, or all the way over here to Cocoa Beach to see a rocket launch, because you can spend your time waiting, you know, for the liftoff in the water and on the beach. And, then all you have to do is turn, and it's right there. And I think that outside of Kennedy Space Center, this may be the closest you can actually get on
Oh,
public land to actually watch a rocket launch. It's a lot of fun. It is very noisy, and if you're ever in this area, I highly recommend that you do that. What you'll see off on the left, that tower rising up, is for Starship. SpaceX is testing that in Texas right now. They've flown it 6 times so far. It is the world's most powerful rocket. When they're going to eventually bring that here, people will not be allowed on that beach during those liftoffs, because the rocket is probably, well, let's see, 1.7 divided 15. It's at least 8 times as powerful. So
wow.
I wouldn't want to be standing on that beach when that thing goes up. Well, I would,
Bring
but
some
I
bring some sunscreen too if you're going to be shooting rockets from the beach.
oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's another thing that we see here, are sad sunburned people.
Okay, let me stop sharing. Do you have a dream shot that you want to get? I think you mentioned that before. A worst case scenario, but is there best case scenario dream shot that you really want to take someday?
Yeah, I would like to be able to extend my optics and to get even closer views of the high altitude portion of flight, because that's the most beautiful part of it to me. The air pressure is lower, the flame plume is longer, it's not quite as bright. You've got more latitude to play around in. That kind of photography, you can easily spend up to $250,000 on it. My friend has at least 100 grand in his photography setup. What it
Wow.
is it's he has a trailer that he hauls around his equipment on, and his equipment is probably the biggest cradle you will ever see. You've probably seen these things. They're like telescope mounts. He can follow the rocket all the way to almost orbit. And I think he's making pretty decent money, because for every one of the local launches, Pete will cover that for a website that's definitely paying him for their live coverage. So I would like to do that. Shot wise, yeah, I would like to find a moment of decision, shot, something that happens that's a positive thing. I get to shoot astronauts as they're leaving, the administration building to head out to the launch pad, and they've got their flight suits on and they're telling goodbye to their families. And these are some poignant moments.
Yeah.
This may very literally be the last time that the family members get to see these astronauts. And it's a almost heavy, but it's a joyful thing, and everybody's happy, but everybody's confident, but not really sure, if you will. That I enjoy
Yeah.
shooting those, because you get a lot of people, having raw emotions that are really photogenic and really worth recording, both as a journalist, and as an artist.
Yeah, that same thing happens here in San Diego when those big Navy ships come home, and the
Mhm.
homecoming with the girlfriends or the wives there
Mhm.
waiting for
Exactly the
them.
same thing. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's take a look at the next one. This might be one of our non-rocket ones here.
I do shoot more than those. This is Bodie, California, and
Where is it? Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Bodie, California
Oh, Bodie.
is,
Okay.
yeah. For those that don't know, it is maybe an hour and a half due east of Yosemite. You cross over the mountains, the Sierra, go down into the desert, and it's almost on the Nevada border. Bodie was one of the big boom towns that had a huge silver mine behind it, and it would boom and bust, and it did several times, and now it's abandoned. Um, the state of California, fortunately, owns the property, and what they're doing is they're calling it decaying in place. Basically, what they do is everything is left in place as it was as much as possible, but they do make sure that some of the buildings, are still standing. This is a workshop that I went to, and we shot the Milky Way at Bodie, and I used just a little side light, to really bring that old car and that old home, up to where, well, instead of being a silhouette, you could see it. I'm actually kind of proud of this picture, because the brightness of the lights kind of gives you a little bit of a challenge, to shoot that dimness versus that light. And without a whole lot of monkeying around in Lightroom and what I call cheating, I got the pictures. The green glow is actually, they call that air glow. And off on the right, 1/3 of the picture, that is Lee Vining, California's lights. So really nice place. That may be one of the quietest places I have ever been in my life.
This is a single shot, right? No
Mhm.
it wasn't a composite or anything like that.
Single shot, 20 seconds. I think it was at f 4, and I was pretty careful, to get my depth of field, as much as possible, to the point where everything in the shot is in focus. So, you have to, really you look at those tables to get this picture to pull it off. So that's why I'm really proud of this shot. And the Milky Way was nice and bright that night too.
An ISO 100, I assume.
Yeah, ice. No, 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 no. That was probably ISO 16,000.
Oh, 16,000. Oh, okay.
And I ran that through Topaz denoise, and which I actually like Topaz denoise better than I like the denoise in Lightroom. They both have really good use cases, but in different applications. For a shot like this, I like Topaz a little bit better.
Okay. Well, before we look at your last picture, I think we have one left. Do you have any wild, crazy stories from all these launches that you shot or interactions with people out
Oh
there?
yeah.
Anything that you can think of?
I was at a museum in Huntsville on an assignment to shoot an A12, which is an SR-71. And they have that in their museum in Huntsville. I'm walking around this aircraft. It's an iconic aircraft, one of the fastest, highest flying aircraft ever. I'm walking around taking pictures from every little angle of it, trying to make sure that I got the best shot, even holding the tripod way up in the air so I can get a little bit of a down look on it, etc. And this old fellow walks up and he's watching me. He says, "You're enjoying taking those pictures, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah, this is, one heck of an airplane." He says, "Yeah, I thought so too. I used to fly it."
Oh,
he,
wow.
he started telling me stories about that airplane and some of the things within the bounds of secrecy that he could tell me that he did with it. He's like, "Yeah, I flew this over the Pacific Ocean and blah 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 blah," and it was really really good stories. But to just be taking pictures of a device like that that's in a museum and somebody walk up to you and that was their airplane and his name was on the side of it. So you can't argue with him. But yeah, that was a fun story. Another one might be we were around shooting a launch and this fellow walks out and he starts talking to us. It turns out he was an astronaut and he wanted us to teach him how to take pictures of rocket launches.
Oh, you got a client. You got a client right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. I mean, hey, if you want to, have some personal tutorials, I'll be happy to do it. So, really nice guy.
Did you end up doing it?
Well, I
For
told him
him?
the basics. Yeah, I mean, I've written a couple tutorials on launch photography. I am by no means the most prolific or the best of the writers of the launch photography tutorials.
Well, let's take a look at your last photo here. Okay, here we go.
A streak. That is a United Launch Alliance Atlas V, and that was shot across the Indian River from the launch pad, so it's quite a distance away. And think of it is we had those low clouds, those low coastal clouds, and perfectly clear skies. So that is F18-ish, ISO 100, probably 300 seconds, and shot on a D750. This was before I actually even got his D7 II. I was still using my 750s, as my prime cameras. So you might notice at the very top, there's a little bit of a limb sticking in there. I've always wanted to just, edit that out. But, part of it is the honest thing to do is to not do it. And
I won't tell anyone. You can do it.
yeah, I think I could really get away with it. But, I would know.
Yeah, yeah.
So that is the Lucy launch. I forget where Lucy went, but it was a interplanetary probe of some kind. And you see how it lit up the clouds, see how it gave some nice reflections off of the water, and the stars are streaked in the background. If I had that shot to do over again, I might actually stack uh, the stars into longer streaks, just to see if it looked good or not. But I think that that's a pretty complete picture. that's one that I've sold several times that people seem to like, and I'm pretty proud of it.
Yeah, the clouds really give a sense of how high this thing is going,
Mhm.
right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and it relatively quickly, like within 45, 50 seconds, it's getting towards the top of that arc. And you really don't notice the arc when you're shooting it. It just looks like it goes up and just continues on. But yeah, it's following the curve of the earth by that.
Well, I think that's all the photos. Do you have any final thoughts? What's the best way for people to contact you? Instagram, your website? How do you prefer people
Um,
reach out to you?
Probably the easiest way to reach out to me is on X. I'm active on X. Politics aside, I stay away from that. I don't care. I don't want to get involved with it. But there's an active launch community in there. So that's kind of my audience. And I am the old man par at the old man par on X. Um, and I'll send you what I'll do is I'll send you these and you can, put them in the description if you will. But um, I have a personal website. It is oldmanpar.com. And side story, the reason that I use that is because I used to do golf photography and write about golf. So,
And you're an
uh,
old man. I like how you admit you're an old man. You're like
yeah,
putting it
I'm an
out
old
there. I'm
man
an
now.
old man.
I had the hardest time admitting that to myself, because hey, you look in the mirror and you go, "Who's this guy?" But I was born in 1961, so and I was born here, moved away for a long time, and then moved back. I saw all the Saturn V's because of my grandfather's role, especially in NASA. I got to meet a lot of the astronauts, including Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, a few
Wow.
others,
Wow.
and not in official settings. They come over to grandpa's house to have a cookout or something like that. Really the idea was we're going to cook out, then everybody else will go away and we'll work a little while. But I'm a little 5, 6 year old kid. Hello, Mr. Armstrong. So
Kids
yeah.
have no filter. Kids have no filter, right? I'm sure you said some
Oh yeah,
funny
yeah.
stuff back then.
I asked him what it was like to walk on the moon, and he told me it was bouncy.
It was bouncy. Oh my gosh.
But the astronauts, even today, they're just regular people, that have fantastic, daring jobs. But at their heart, they're engineers, and I've never met one that I didn't like. Some of them are a little more business than others, and some are a little more jokier than others. But they're all good people. So if you ever have a chance to talk to one, by all means, ask them the questions. They have heard it before, probably, and they probably won't mind answering you again.
Well, I appreciate your time and letting us look at these amazing photos with the stories behind them. I guess I'll see you on Instagram and X. Thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Yeah, I'll be on Instagram, X, and if you want to see our stories as we evolve with them. I'm involved with a group of photographers. We're at floridamedianow.com,
Okay.
and that's really honestly the best place to find me. So go check that out. We keep up with the major space stories that are evolving in Florida right now, and we're also starting to branch out to Texas and up to Maryland too. So we'd love to see you.
All right. Thank you so much. If you don't mind sticking around just to make sure the upload has finished uploading to the
Okay.
web, and then I would appreciate that. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Sure.
All right. Bye.
Bye.